It's so good to see you, man.
You too.
I've been trying
Yeah.
to get you to come on my show for a while. Now I know why it took this long because
Yeah.
the new record and everything.
Yeah. And I
Which
also been dealing with fatigue issues for the last 10 years. So I just really kind of was in pretty much like semi-retirement mode for a while.
how you
So
feeling now?
I feel pretty good. It's up and down. It's way better than it was like 5 years ago.
That's good to
It's
hear.
manageable. It ebbs and flows. There's a lot of work around the new record. So occasionally I do have a little bit of a crash and I need a couple days to kind of recoup, but it's going well.
That's got to be tough, man.
Yeah.
Got to be tough. Before we get into the new record, Fade Away Blue, which I spent a lot of time with and I really like, do you mind if we go back a little because I want to talk to you about your history because it's
Sure.
so.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you remember when you were growing up in the Pacific Northwest, where I think you've spent most of your life, what some of the first music was that you started gravitating towards?
Well, the very first music that I got into, I loved Glenn Campbell when I was a little kid, like when I was
Wow.
really young. Rhinestone Cowboy. I loved it. And I would look at the cover of the record. He had like a red, I don't know if it was a Gibson or like a Mosrite or something. It's like a 335 shape and it had his name on the fretboard. And I would just stare at that record cover. So Glenn Campbell was probably my first, excuse me, musical hero. Um, there was a lot of great music around the house. My dad had a killer record collection. So I grew up hearing a lot of the blockbuster records of the 70s. So you had your Fleetwood Mac and the Eagles and James Taylor and Elton John and all that stuff. So that was sort of seeping in all the time. The first music that I kind of claimed as my own, like the first record I ever bought was Kiss Alive. And this is kind of a funny story. So Christmas, I must have been maybe second grade, somewhere along there. Our family, a lot of records would change hands on Christmas Day, and it was one of those turntables where you'd stack them all up, and then the record would drop, and then the next record would drop. You know how those old
Yeah, yeah, I
turntables
remember
work.
those.
And I think there was like a Captain and Tennille record in there, and then Kiss came on. And my cousin Dave had given my dad, his uncle, Kiss Rock and Roll All Over. And that record dropped on, and the first song came on, and I was like a scene out of Beavis and Butthead. I was like, it just like the rock and roll thing really got me. So I was obsessed with Kiss as a grade schooler and got sort of kicked out of that. I think it was somewhere between fifth grade and sixth grade.
Hmm.
My parents had a party, and they were listening to Bridge Over Troubled Water, Simon and Garfunkel. And I heard the song Cecilia, coming down the hall while all the adults were partying. And the next day I woke up, I go, I got to find that record. I love that song. And then from that minute, I never listened to Kiss again. It was like Simon and Garfunkel. And then I dug into my dad's Dylan records. There was a cool thing where I was homesick and I had a fever. You know how you get kind of wonky when you have a
Yeah.
fever. And I had heard a song where the lyric was "Everybody must get stoned" on the radio the night before, and I was like, I know my dad has that song. I'm going to find it. So of course I looked on the back of his Dylan records, and there was no song called "Everybody Must Get Stoned." Eventually, I just dropped the needle like on every song, trying to find that song, and among those was "Like a Rolling Stone." And when I heard "Like a Rolling Stone," it was just like a bolt. It just like whew, that really got me. And then my Dylan obsession began, and then junior high, a lot more of the hard rock came into the picture. Like AC/DC was huge for me. All the biggies, Aerosmith, Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, was really into that. Um, my friend John Evison, we had a band called March of Crimes. It was like a punk rock band. So he went down to California one summer and came back with all these great punk rock records. So high school, I got into some punk rock. Um, yeah, so a lot of varied music.
Yeah,
Everything
that's
from
cool.
James Taylor to the Descendants.
Now, is this what got you to start playing? I mean, when did you start playing?
I started playing ukulele. I was like 4 years old, and there's a cassette tape
Ukulele.
of me just banging on my mom's ukulele, just making up songs. I had a song called "Oh Boy, You Got to Get Out of This Town," and it was just basically I didn't know any chords. I just strummed the open strings and just banged on it. I began piano lessons. I think I was around second grade and studied piano for around 6 years. I got a guitar, like a cheap Sears and Roebuck acoustic guitar for Christmas around second grade, I think. Didn't really grasp it at first. I think my hands were too small and didn't really catch until about sixth grade. And that's when I got back to the guitar and started playing, AC/DC bar chord songs, on a like nylon string acoustic guitar.
Yeah.
And then eighth grade, I saved up my money and got my first electric guitar. And that's when the bug really bit me. And I would literally run home from the school bus to get to my guitar that much faster. And I got the guitar first, and I was waiting to get the amp, but the amp was on special order. And I plugged the guitar into the stereo. I think it was into the tape deck, and it was great. The more you turned it up, the more distorted it got, until eventually I totally blew up the family stereo. But yeah, I was really obsessed with guitar by that point. And then, but was mainly just like, into lead guitar and rock guitar at that point. Around the time I was 16 is when I kind of gravitated back to the acoustic guitar and started writing songs. And
I
that's
was going to
when,
ask you if you wrote on piano or guitar, but you just answered that question. So, have you ever
yeah,
written on a piano, by the way, or has it
a
always been the
couple
guitar?
times. Yeah, just, 99.9% guitar. I've
Yeah.
written a couple of songs on piano, but yeah, it's all guitar.
Well, I knew about well, I've heard about Ramadillo. Did I say that right? Ramadillo?
Yeah, Ramadillo. Yeah.
Ramadillo. Were there bands before that one?
Yeah, my very first band is actually a footnote in rock history. It was called March of Crimes. And March of Crimes, excuse me, March of Crimes, we were a four-piece punk rock band. We practiced in Steve Nelson's dad's guest bedroom, teeny little bedroom. The drummer was a guy named Steve Nelson. He went on to play with a band called The Accused, which was a
Oh,
pretty
yeah. Yeah.
significant punk band in Seattle. Um, the singer Jonathan Evison, who I'm actually doing a podcast with tomorrow, he's gone on to be a really successful author. And then for a minute in the band, I overlapped with Ben Shepherd from Soundgarden. So that's where you
Wow.
get kind of
Bass
the the
player.
the
Yeah.
the rock history footnote. So I was in the band, and my good friend Andy was playing bass, Andy Veterani, and then they kind of kicked Andy out, and another bass player, Andy Carroll, came in. And then Ben joined for a minute. So I overlapped with Ben for just a minute, and then I quit because I wasn't really feeling the up-tempo, super fast punk rock thing, and kind of retreated back to my bedroom to play along with BB King and AC/DC records. But then they went on to do a lot of cool stuff, and I was really jealous at the time. So they were really big in the Seattle, 84, 85, around that time, sort of
Before the
burgeoning.
whole grunge started
Yeah, but
happening.
things were kind of, it was a cool scene at that time. There's a great club called the Metropolis, another club called Guerrilla Gardens, and they were playing all the cool gigs. They opened for GBH. Their demo found its way to Jello Biafra, who like I think, spoke highly of it in a fanzine and stuff. So they were kind of doing all this cool stuff. I was like, oh man, I quit this band. So that was my first band. My second band was called 25th Hour, and I just played guitar, again, just guitar. I wasn't singing. And that was like truly a garage band for real. Like we practiced in Brian Fenner's garage. And I think we only did one real gig. We opened for The Accused and for Malfunction, Andy Wood's band
Yeah.
before Mother Love Bone.
Wow,
And
that's
that was
cool.
yeah, it was a cool gig. That was my very first gig. We got paid $10. There were four in the band, so the two guys that were old enough to drive got $3, and the two of us who didn't drive got $2. So that was a memorable gig, and the highlight of that gig was Tommy Nienemeyer. I hope I'm saying that right, from The Accused. After the gig, he said, "You've got promise, kid." And Tommy, they had records out and everything. I'm like, "Oh my God, Tommy Nienemeyer said I had promise. This is great."
I was going to ask you about the Seattle guys because I know you played with Mike McCreary, and I know you know Stone. Were those guys all around you going to school, or were you guys? Did you know any of those guys? I mean, you mentioned Andy Wood. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
and Ben.
Andy grew up on Bainbridge Island, right? I moved to Bainbridge Island in 1977 when I was 8 years old, and Andy was about I think 4 years ahead of me, so I didn't really know him at that time because he was a bit older, and frankly, was kind of a rock star around school.
From
But I
day one,
did,
probably.
yeah, totally, yeah, amazing guy. Um, so I didn't get to know him until after I was out of high school. Stone, I first met. Actually, that's another bit of the footnote of March of Crimes. Is Stone was sort of almost in March of Crimes. Now, depending on your source, I think Wikipedia mentions him as a member of the band, but to my knowledge, I don't think he was ever officially a member. I saw an interview with him once where he basically said he came to a couple practices and then the band was like, "Yeah, no thanks." It was really early on. So I first met Stone actually at John, the singer's house, who lived right up the street from me on Bainbridge. And I was about 15 at that time. So we met briefly at that point. It wasn't until I think I was around 19 or so and I moved over to Seattle that we became friendly. And I used to go over to Stone's house and we would just play guitar and hang out. And he actually secured a demo deal for me with Polygram Records
Oh, wow.
really early on. Yeah.
Nice. Now, did you
Um,
ever see Green River play?
I never saw them live. No, no. And I was just, I was a kid when all that was
Yeah.
happening and wasn't,
Yeah, he's older. Yeah.
yeah. So, but yeah, so I got a demo deal from Mother Love Bone's A&R guy. Gave me
Michael
2000.
Goldstone.
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah, I
Michael
know
Goldstone gave
Goldie.
me, yeah, 2 grand to go to the studio. And I probably should have like, honed in on like 3 or 4 songs, but I made like a full 10-song cassette album. So
Wow,
yeah,
that's
Stone and I
cool. I
were
never
tight,
heard
and
about that. That is
yeah,
cool.
and then Mother Love Bone had me open a bunch of shows. Like I was the opening act on Andy's last show at the Central Tavern. Got to play a
Wow.
handful of shows with them, so that was a really big opportunity at the time.
I got to see them at the Whiskey in LA. I got to work on the EP that they
Hmm.
put out because I was at Metal Blade at the time, and then at that time, a lot of majors were signing bands, and they wanted to build a indie base for the band. So Shine came into my hands, and I got to
Yeah,
meet the band. Stone
yeah.
and Jeff came to my office. And they just want to talk about basketball. They didn't really want to talk about, I'm sure
Yeah,
you know that about
yeah,
them.
sure.
They're really basketball fans. But seeing it, I'm happy I can say I saw Andrew Wood play a gig because that was
Yeah.
special for sure. It was that
Oh yeah.
Dogs D'Amour tour that they did,
Yeah, I remember
the
that. Yeah.
national tour.
Yeah.
Um, okay, after you were in, was there other bands
Yeah, so
before?
after where were we? Yeah, 25th Hour was like my first band. And then I played a few kind of coffee shop gigs. Like when I first moved over to Seattle, I played in a little coffee shop up in the University District and, literally got paid beans, to play the gig. They sent me home with a pound of espresso beans and feed me all the coffee I could drink during the gig. And then formed a band with my buddy Sean Mugridge, who was also the bass player in 25th Hour. And we formed a group, a trio. We found a drummer named Mark Boquist. And at first, the band was called Strayland Street after the name of one of my songs. And then eventually we changed the name to Ramadillo. So that was like the first, real band that I had where I was, writing the songs and singing lead vocals. So we operated as a 3-piece for a while. And then we brought in a great keyboard player. Um, and then we had some sort of utility players. We had a great pedal steel player that joined us, another guitar player, second guitar player for a while that kind of floated in and out. We had like a group of background singers that would come in from time to time. And that band was reasonably successful around Seattle. Like we could pack clubs. Like we started out pretty modest, playing really tiny rooms, and we got to the point where, we could headline the coolest clubs in town. But we were kind of out of step, with what was happening at the time. That would have been 90, I think it was 90, 91.
Hmm.
So, this is, Seattle is really on the map at this time. And, we played like North by Northwest. Do you remember that when they had the
Yeah,
North by
yeah, I do.
Northwest? We did a showcase. Pearl Jam was on the bill. And it was a big, big hoopla. Everybody was up from the labels and checking everybody out. And I had interest from publishers and stuff at the time, but none of it really stuck and just never really got real traction with any labels with that band. We were like alt country before the term existed. We'd play like revved up versions of like George Jones and Willie Nelson, and then a lot of the originals that we played were pretty country fried and blues oriented and kind of straight ahead roots rock. So I think a lot of the bands, a lot of the A&R people coming to Seattle were looking for big muff pedals, and there were a handful of bands like us that were kind of off the beaten path that didn't get that attention.
Around that time, 1991 is when I met Elaine, who we'll be
Yeah,
talking about more,
sure.
because I used to go to all her gigs,
Yeah,
Coconut Teaser mostly, and Molly Malone, wherever she was playing. I was really,
yeah.
really into Elaine. When did you meet Elaine, and when did you guys realize you had this musical connection? Was that before the first record? It was before the first record, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So the Ramadilla thing kind of ran its course. We broke up the band, and then I kind of played around Seattle for about a year as the Pete Droge band, and just kind of felt like I was, kind of done with that scene, and had played it kind of played it out. And so in January of 93, I moved down to Portland. And literally, like the day I got to town, I was renting a room in drummer Greg Williams' house. And Greg's brother Brent was rehearsing in the living room, learning Elaine's songs to go play a gig with her that night, and invited me to come. I was like, "Oh, I've got plans. I'm going to Blues Jam Night," which is just crazy to think that I was going to Blues Jam Night. But I was like, "I'm going to go meet musicians in town." So I almost met her on the night I moved there, but I ended up meeting her 3 nights later. There was a party for the opening of a new club called the Living Room, which was a small acoustic room above La Luna, which was
Yeah.
the famous rock room up there. So yeah, we met it was like a private party for the opening of the Living Room, and we met that night, and we've been together ever since. And so, we exchanged music, and I played her my demo, and she played me all her music, and as I was writing songs, I started to get gigs around town. I'm like, hey, why don't you sing some harmonies? And then when it came time to make the record, hey, come to Atlanta and make the record. And then it was time to go on tour. Hey, come on tour. This was a natural thing. She actually came down to South by Southwest and was in the band for my showcase down there. That kind of sealed the deal for me with my deal with American.
Was it the music connection or the love connection that
It was
happened
both.
first?
It was both. Yeah, for sure.
Simultaneous?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
That's a great
Yeah,
story.
yeah,
So you got signed around that after that. How did that
yeah.
all happen? Was there a lot of labels that wanted you by that point?
There were, yeah. So if we back up just a little bit, before I left Seattle, and also kind of getting back to the Pearl Jam connection. So you'd asked how I'd met Stone. I had met Mike kind of just around the scene, and we ended up working together at a pizza restaurant, and became friends. And after he went off and had all that success with Pearl Jam, he came off the road after whatever grueling tour they had done on that first album. And we had dinner one night before a show. And I was explaining to him, I'd mentioned that I had sort of publishers that were interested in stuff like that. I had some interest, but all of them had strings attached. Um, and none of them really felt like the right thing to me. And later that night, we were both drinking a lot at the time. And so after the show, we're hanging out. He's like, "Hey, Pete, I'm going to give you the money to go in the studio." And I was like, "Okay, well, if you sober up in the morning and you still feel the same way, I'll take you up on it." And the next morning, about 11 a.m., the phone rang and woke me up, and it was Mike. He said, "Hey, I was serious. I want to do it." And he gave me the budget to go into a good studio.
Wow.
And we made a 5-song demo. He played some guitar on it. And then that demo started making the rounds. I ended up connecting with Pearl Jam's manager, Kelly Curtis,
Hmm.
through that demo. And actually, one of the deals that seemed a little bit shady to me, I actually went to Kelly and was kind of like, "Hey, can you look at this and tell me what you think?" And he was like, "Pff, don't do it." He said it's terrible. Even if it did hold water, just a bogus contract. Don't sign this.
Was it a
Um,
major
no, no, no. It was a manager that wanted to do kind of like a
production deal,
kind of
kind
a
of?
yeah kind of thing. They're going
Yeah.
to help me pay my rent, but they wanted my publishing, and it just was
No.
not great. So anyway, so once the tape was in the can, then Kelly became interested in managing me along with an associate there at his place called Krisha Ojiro. And so then the showcase at South by Southwest, like the Monday, it was like, classic story. Like the Monday after the showcase, we had like seven majors that wanted to sign me.
Was it a
And
tough decision for you?
well, Kelly's theory was not to do like a bidding war, which was really common at the time, especially around Seattle. And you would hear these stories about bands doing these bidding wars and kind of going with the label that gave them the most money, but maybe wasn't the best home for them. So he didn't want to do the bidding war route. So what we did is we entertained each offer in the order that they came in. So the first people that kind of stuck their neck out, and that was actually A&M, where you used to work.
Yeah, I was wondering who the A&R person was that you were talking to. You remember?
It was Larry Hamby.
Larry.
Yeah, yeah. What years were you at A&M?
I was there from 91 to 97.
Okay, you were there at the time. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I
we
was. I
we we went.
remember. I remember the
Yeah,
buzz that was going on with you because of Elaine too.
yeah.
And yeah, Larry signed Cheryl Crow. So,
Oh wow.
he and a bunch of other people too. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I think it would have been a good place for you, but you ended up
We'll
in a good,
see. Yeah, yeah. Who knows? So
yeah.
it's sliding doors kind of a situation. But we went all the way through the deal, and there was sort of businessy stuff in there that Kelly wasn't comfortable with. And it was all to do with sort of Polygram. The parent company had stuff in the contract that they wouldn't budge on that Kelly was adamant about not wanting to budge on. So we ended up walking from that deal, and it was pretty far along. I think, it was a bummer to sort of have it fall through. But then after that came Brendan O'Brien at American. And that's, that came about because Mike had the tape and they had just made the Versus record with Brendan, and he gave the tape to Brendan, who had just acquired signing power at American Records. And so Brendan came up to Portland where I was living at the time, and we sat down, we had a long talk, and I was just so passionate. I'm telling him how I want my record to be and blah, 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 and this kind of production and that and this and there. Like really gave him an earful. And after the meeting, he came back to Kelly Curtis and he said, I think maybe Pete doesn't need a producer. I think maybe he wants to produce himself. And
Wow.
I was kind of like, whoa, no, 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 no. I want you to produce me. So, um, and then he brought me down to Los Angeles and they put me up at the Sunset Marquis Hotel and he set me up and he had like one of those bungalows.
Yeah.
And I had a piano in there and everything, set me up with a cassette recorder and my guitar and just said, play every song that you have. And so I played, pretty much every song that I had. And apparently, he took that tape to Rick Rubin and supposedly, played him one song, played him a song called Strayland Street. And Rick agreed to let him sign me. And
Y- And
that's how
then
that
then the
started.
record came out. And
Yeah.
if you don't love me, I'll kill myself was the big hit, but that song 4th of July, I remember when I
Mhm.
heard that record, I was like, wow, that was really good. Um, did the Dumb and Dumber thing happen like right away? Because it seems
No,
like, was it how much further down the road did that happen?
the record was released in May and it was really slow out of the gate. And we had a hard time finding a tour. Eventually, we just ended up doing a residency tour on our own where we would go around the Northeast to 7 cities. Well, actually, no, we did New York, Boston, Philly, and DC, and then we would plug in different cities, on the nights off, and then we did that for 7 weeks. So it was kind of a slow build. The first single was Strayland Street, which did okay at AAA. And then the second single was If You Don't Love Me, and that started to pick up a little bit of steam at radio. Um, it wasn't until I think the movie made it come out in like December, something like that.
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
So by the time we were out on the West Coast doing a residency tour, again, that's when I heard about it. And I remember, I think we were at the Viper Room, and somebody, I don't remember who it was, hey, your song's going to be in this movie, Dumb and Dumber. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And they were like, it's Jim Carrey. And I'm like, I don't know who that is. Oh, he's a big star. He's going to be huge. I'm like, okay. And like this movie's got like a $20 million advertising budget. I'm like, okay. And your song's going to be on the soundtrack. I'm like, okay. And your song's going to be the single on the soundtrack. I was like, okay. Like having no idea like that each of these things are like amazing when they line up, all of those things lining up. And sure enough, that all happened. And around that time, I ended up doing my publishing deal with EMI. So we kind of held out on publishing. But I needed money to kind of keep the band on the road. There just wasn't really enough tour support to support the band, and so I ended up doing the publishing deal to kind of help keep the band going. And you're an industry insider, so you may appreciate the inside baseball stuff here. So EMI put money into the pot for radio promotion for the single.
They did.
Yeah, yeah, that was kind of part of the deal.
Nice.
And then the soundtrack album came out on RCA, and so RCA kind of funneled some money into it too. So I think that's what kind of helped, push the song up a bit further than it would have gone on its own. And it was on the soundtrack album, which sold really well. Um, and yeah, that was a great opportunity.
And then the Tom Petty tour was in 95. So
That's right.
did that tell me about that
Oh
because
my God.
that must have been incredible for you.
Oh, a dream come true. Yeah, it was totally amazing. I still remember like, the day I heard about it. So we were doing a thing, we were taping something at MTV and I got the call from management like, "Hey, you got the tour." And I knew that we were going for it. And I imagine that Tom and his whole world just got totally hit from every angle, because there's Rick who had just produced the Wildflowers album. There were other connections. through our booking agent and management. All everybody was lobbying for me, and he had come out to see us play at the Viper Room. So if I had known that that was sort of our audition, I probably would have been terrified. But yeah, so that was just amazing, and
Did
we
you
ended
you
up.
knew he was in the room, obviously, right?
Yeah, yeah, I did. Yeah. Actually, I don't know if I knew before or not. That's a good question. I don't recall if I knew before the gig if he was there. I know we hung out afterwards. There's a picture of me and him and Jacob Dylan that they ran in Rolling Stone magazine
Wow.
from that time.
I think I remember that actually. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. Yeah,
But
it's a good
yeah, so
fit.
we
It was
yeah,
a good fit.
it was a great fit. And we did the first leg we did, and then the Jayhawks and Taj Mahal did the second and third. And I was really flattered and honored that for the fourth and fifth legs they invited us back to the tour. So we ended up doing three legs of that tour. And it was a great fit. In fact, some of the crew told us, like we've never seen an opening act. The only opening act they said that got as good of a response as we did from their audience was Lenny Kravitz. And so I thought that was pretty good. It was just a good fit. In fact, we had one family member that was out in the audience one time, and when we started our set, the person next to them thought it was Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. And they're like, no, no, this is the opening act. They're like, no, that's Tom Petty. I said, no. They must have been up in the nosebleeds. But it's a great fit. We sold a ton of t-shirts. We had a t-shirt that was like a playing card illustration of me, like with a hat holding a guitar, and it just had my initials on it, didn't have my name on it anywhere. And we were selling so many t-shirts that we kind of went to the merch people and said, I think you need to put a sign on here that says this is a Pete Droge shirt because we think that people think they're buying a Tom Petty shirt. And but we put the sign up, to make it clear, and we still sold a ton of t-shirts. But it was just a dream. I mean, getting to know all of them, they were so good to us, just amazingly generous and kind. As an example, um, one night I approached Tom and I was like, "How do you keep your voice in such good shape?" Because he was so consistently great vocally, and I was having a hard time, kind of up and down with my voice, getting hoarse and
Mhm.
trashed. And he taught me his vocal warm-ups and turned me on to the tea that he drank. And then he had his monitor engineer like ring out my monitors for me. So
Wow.
that's really kind. For a headliner to be that cool is really amazing. And just watching them every night was just like going to school. There was another cool moment later on in the tour. We played Philadelphia, where we were on I think 5 radio stations in Philly, including like the big pop stations and stuff. So the single was really doing well there, and we just had a killer show. I mean, it's like it felt like it was our show. And after the show, Tony Dimitriadis, Tom's longtime manager, came up to me and he was like, hey, I see you guys you're learning, like you're learning how to play these rooms, and it's really working. It's neat to see your growth. And he said that reminded him of the early days. I think the first arena tour that Tom and the Heartbreakers did was opening for the Jay Giles band. And he said, I watched, Tom, learn from Peter Wolf and the Jay Giles band on how to play the bigger rooms, and I see you guys doing the same thing. And then I think it was really shortly after that we played Boston, and Peter Wolf came out to see us and was hanging in the dressing room, and I got to tell him that story.
That's cool.
So, yeah, it
I'm
was
gonna
it was a dream. The whole tour was just amazing.
I'm gonna drag some Boston people into this because I
Yeah.
recently talked to Dan and Warren Zanes from the Del
Hmm.
Fuegos. It's kind of a same kind of story. They got their first big break when Tom Petty took them on
Yeah.
tour.
Yeah.
It just made me think of that. Um, I'm not going to go through every one of your records, but I am going to talk about this just so I can get this guy's name in here. You did some lineup changes and you hooked up with David Hall, who
Hmm.
played a great role with many great musicians like Buddy Miles and Joe Perry and filled in for Aerosmith. And I love Dave. So
Oh yeah.
can you talk about that transition where you kind of flipped the whole band except for Elaine, right?
Let's see. We started the Petty tour. And then in between those legs, I talked about we did the first leg and then the fourth and fifth. In that time, Jeff Trott had been playing with us. He left the band, and of course went on to have all of his massive success as co-writer and co-producer with Sheryl Crow.
Yeah.
And then bass player Robert Cooper got an offer from one of his musical heroes, Tommy Stinson, to form a band called Perfect. I think that was the name of the
Oh
band,
yeah,
Perfect.
perfect. I remember them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think that was what it was called at that time. And so he left. And so then Peter Stroud replaced Jeff Trott, and then Dave Holt came in to replace Robert. And we held auditions in LA for the bass player slot. And our drummer at the time was Dan McCarroll, who's gone on to be a big muckety muck. He was the president of Capitol Records and then the president of Warner Brothers
Yeah.
Records. This is interesting. So Dan McCarroll was the drummer in my band when we were opening for Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. And then years later, fast forward, he was the president of Tom Petty's label. So the moral of the story, headliners, be nice to the drummer in your opening act. One day they may be the president of your record company. But anyway, so when we were getting ready for these auditions, the song was on the radio. We were about to go out on tour with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. There were a lot of bass players that wanted the gig. And we had about 3 days just packed full of auditions. And Dan McCarroll, who had come up in the Boston scene, knew about Dave. He said, Pete, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. Everybody's going to be good. These are all going to be good players. Some are going to be great. And then Dave Hull is going to come in and he's going to blow them all away and win the gig. And that's exactly what happened. And I actually totally remember the moment that I first started playing with them. So we would open each audition with the same song. So we would start with a song from Necktie Second called "So I'm Over You." It's kind of a minor, jangly rock song, and that was a song that we would open with in the show a lot of the times. And I remember like when it kicked in and with Dave on bass, I was like, how is it that I'm now like 1,000 times better guitar player than I've ever been before? It's like we just locked into the groove, our pockets aligned, and he's so good. He just gives you this safe place to land, and you can push and pull. And we would we'd have moments in the show where like Peter Stroud would really stretch out and play some leads, and Dave and I would just hunker down and chug and build the groove. And he's incredible, wonderful human being, great musician, just staggeringly great. So
I remember talking to Elaine after he joined the band because I interviewed him in college radio when he was playing with Charlie Farron, and The
yeah,
Enemy was the name of the band, and they were a short-lived band, but I think he did Fahrenheit too.
yeah,
But he
sure,
he played with so many people.
yeah,
Another thing I want to mention is Beautiful Girl on the Beautiful Girl soundtrack because I love that movie, and I immediately knew it was you when I heard the song in the
mm,
movie. That must have been a thrill for you because that movie was did pretty well too. You had a good history with movie. We're going to get to the
yeah,
best one in a minute, but
right, yeah, yeah.
Beautiful Girl. I mean, well, now that wasn't on any of your albums, right?
No, no, that was a standalone just for the soundtrack. And that actually came like right at the end. I mean, the timing was amazing. So we were just wrapping up, almost, I guess it'd be about, you know, a year and 9 months on the road, something like that,
Yeah.
supporting Necktie Second. And literally the VHS tape arrived at my hotel on the last date of the Petty tour, which was pretty much the end of that whole touring cycle for Necktie Second. And they asked me to co-write the song with Dave Stewart, of course, of the Eurythmics, who was also doing the score for the movie. Now, this is what they told me. They told me, that they'd reached out to Bob Dylan and he passed. They reached out to Tom Petty and he passed. And then I can't remember somebody else. And then they came to me and I'm like, well, how many other people were there on that list before you got to me? But in any event, as fate would have it, eventually they landed on me, and I was happy to do it. So I immediately, got home from tour and sat in my little rented corporate apartment because we basically had all of our stuff in storage at the time because we were just on the road so much, and watched the rough cut of the movie and took Dave Stewart's demo, which was a rough sketch of the song, and fleshed it out, kind of finished it, and kind of made it my own. And then went into a local studio, kind of legendary studio called Bad Animals, which was next to Studio X, and cut a demo of that with Matt Cameron on drums.
Wow.
I should dig that up for my Substack. That'd be a good thing to share on Substack. So Matt played drums on it, and we submitted the demo, and everybody loved it. And we went out to a great studio called Bear Creek up north of Seattle, flew the band out, and Dave Stewart produced it. And that was a dream. That was really fun working with Dave. Really just eccentric in the best possible way. Super creative guy. So we cut the track, and we also did a little bit of underscore music. We cut some little, cues for the movie that play in there. And we did cool stuff. Like we did, if you hear the tape flanging effect in there, that's old school tape flanging. And it was all cut on tape, and really cool experience. And we got to go out to New York and There was like a premiere party on MTV
I
that we
watched
played.
it on TV.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was going to
so
mention that. I used to see you guys on TV all the time
yeah,
because you had Jon Stewart and all these different
yeah,
appearances. But that MTV thing must have been cool because Matt Dillon and all the cast were there. Did you
yeah.
get to meet the whole cast? And
Mira Sorvino came and knocked on the dressing room door, and
really?
I got to schmooze with her, and it was funny. The rep from the record company felt like I think Mira Sorvino has a crush on you, or whatever. I don't know if it's true or not, but anyway, got to meet Mira. That was it as far as the actors in the film. I didn't rub shoulders with any of the rest, but it was fun. We went to the premiere, so we did the thing for MTV. Was that I don't remember where we taped that, but we went to the big world premiere, and they had the whole red carpet, and they brought us in a limousine and opened the door, and you walk down the red carpet. There's the paparazzi photographers there, and I heard one of them go like, "Who's that?" And the other cameraman next to him says, "That's Pete Droge. He's nobody. Don't waste your film." So we went in, and this was terrible. So they had us seated like way down in the front, and we had to leave early because we had to get back. I don't know if it was for sound check or for the taping or whatever. We had to leave. And so, our song plays at the beginning, and then we're there for like maybe 20 minutes, and then there was like the band and a couple crew members. We had to all file out, which was just like horrible. We just wanted just like, this isn't a commentary on the movie. We're not walking out because the movie sucks. Like we
Oh,
have
that
to go. I
must have
wanted to
been
explain.
difficult.
Wanted to explain to everybody like we have to go. We don't have a choice. But yeah, that was cool. No, and it was nice timing. It was like right in between Necktie Second and my second album, Find a Door. So it was a nice little kind of bridge to kind of
Yeah, I've
get
been to
this
some of those
done there.
movie premieres, and that must have been difficult. In fact, there was a film that I worked with Elaine on, Hard Promises. She had a song. Oh no, was it
Oh
Stone?
yeah, yeah, Stone Cold. Yeah,
Stone Cold.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. All right, now this last thing before we talk about Fade Away Blue, I can't just go by this because Almost Famous is one of my all-time favorite movies. I
yeah.
remember them talking about making this film for a long time, and I didn't know you guys were in the film. And then I watched it, and there you were in the hotel scene.
Yeah.
That must have been incredible for you.
Oh yeah, amazing. Yeah. I originally read for the part of the bass player.
You
So
did?
yeah, I did. Yeah, Cameron flew me to LA, and I did an audition in Cameron's office. Totally tanked the audition. I was horrible. And
Oh,
I acted as a kid, I did a lot of acting. I was pretty serious about it up through high school. And I had just finished doing a tour, an acoustic tour with John Doe, and he had done some acting. And I called him and I said, what advice do you have? And he turned me on to a book by Sanford Meisner. I think it's called On Acting, maybe something like that. So I read that book and I got the sides and I memorized my lines, and I was, really stoked to do it and completely choked. I was so nervous. But as it turned out, so he called to let me know that I hadn't gotten the part, and he said that it was visual chemistry was the reason that they didn't choose me. Which, if of course, the film, so the plot line that Billy Crudup is too good looking compared to the rest of the
yeah,
band.
yeah, yeah,
So I
right.
like to think that the visual chemistry was like
Oh,
I was too good
yeah.
looking. So I don't know. I'll stick with that.
I would
Um,
go for that.
yeah,
That sounds about
yeah.
right.
So I don't know if it was 2, maybe 3 weeks later, I got, what I consider to be the best consolation prize in motion picture history, where he said, "Hey, we've got this scene where we need a song, and he was kind of looking for kind of a Graham Parsons, Emmylou kind of vibe. And it's funny because I didn't really roll up my sleeves and approach it like a homework assignment necessarily. But the next song that I wrote was Small Time Blues, and I had a little 8-track reel-to-reel machine. I just cut a quick demo of it, and I sent it to him, and he loved it. And and we got that part. And then originally the idea was that we would lip sync to the demo, and that's what we were planning on doing. And so we came down to LA, and on the day of the shoot, he's like, "Hey, I'm thinking maybe we'll play it. Go ahead and just play it live." And I was like, "All right." We'd been playing the song live a little bit, so we were like, "Okay." And so that's what we did. And they had just like a boom, a little boom mic up here, and the engineers did a great job of recording it. It sounds really good. And we played through the song one time, and after he's done, he's like, "Cut, we got it." And it was a
Wow.
stressful day because they had the soundstage in Manhattan Beach. That was the last day they had it with the whole hotel built out in it. And if they didn't get all the shots they needed that day, they would have had to come back after like going down to San Diego to the arena. It would have cost a gargantuan amount of money. So it was really a pressure cooker of a day. And so our little song kind of happened amongst all this, stress and tension. And we had crew members coming up after, like, that was beautiful. Oh my God, that was amazing. What a moment. And at one point, Noah Taylor came up to us and he's like, that's amazing. You got it in one take. And Elaine goes, well, it's what we do, as if acting was not what he'd do. Um, so, in fairness, Cameron knew that he probably needed 7 seconds or whatever of the scene. So really, we got multiple takes within the one performance of the song. But and then we got to play the rap party, which was super fun. We went to the Palladium and played with Peter Frampton and Ann and Nancy Wilson were there, and that was super fun. And hanging out backstage before the gig, I was talking to Cameron. He said the first rough cut they did was over 4 hours long. And I was like, oh man, it'll be a miracle if we don't end up on the cutting room floor. And he was like, no, I promise. And he says, I never promised this, but your scene will not get cut because it was this really sort of um, crucial moment to develop William's
It
character.
was.
That
Yeah.
among all the craziness and the partying, he's going to stop and hone in on the music. And Kate Hudson literally has to pull him away from the music to take him to the party. So that was like that was cool. And sure enough, we made it in, and we got a little extra time on screen and some props from Cameron in the in the director's cut.
Oh yeah.
Hang tight.
Okay. Uh, uh,
Okay.
um, what was I going to say about Almost Famous? Oh yeah, were you surprised how huge the film became? By the way, I wanted to mention that the director's cut is all I ever. After I saw it in the theater, I got the DVD with the director's cut. The director's cut is definitely the thing. And
Yeah.
you said you got a little more time in there, and and didn't they use your clip? Well, I know it ended up on YouTube, but did they put the clip in the extras of the full
Yeah.
song? Yeah, I
Yeah. The full
thought
song.
so.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
on the extras. Shoot. Sorry about that.
So that worked out really good for you.
It was great. I mean, what an honor. And, just it's a classic. I mean, it's now officially a classic film. And it's like among the greatest rock and roll movies out there. It's so authentic. We were actually just talking about this at a dinner party the other night. Kelly Curtis, who I mentioned before, the
Yeah.
manager, and Peter Frampton. I don't remember what their official title was, but they were consultants to make sure that all the details were
Yeah.
right. And so, you see a scene like when they're all hanging out in catering, like that's just what it's like. A lot of rock and roll movies don't get the details right, and they really nailed it on that film. And then, just amazing on every
Well,
level.
some of those hotels, I mean, the scene in Boston from the Elliott Hotel, I was like, it looked exactly like I know they didn't go to Boston and shoot that, but it looked exact. I used to stay at that hotel.
Yeah.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, and Gramercy Park, same thing. They picked
Yeah.
the right hotels because
I'll
those are
tell
the
you.
real rock and roll hotels,
Yeah. And the Riot House, our scene takes
Yeah.
place, in the Hyatt on Sunset. They actually recreated. So there was a stairwell back in the 70s that had been walled off, and they were going to remodel the lobby of the hotel. And so they actually took the wall out, recreated the stairwell as it was in the 70s. They actually used Spinal Tap, excuse me, to look at the carpet and recreated the carpet. And they just made the lobby exactly like it was in the 70s. And then, the Hyatt went and remodeled after that. They went to great lengths to get all that stuff right. And we got to hang out the night before our shoot. We were there for the scene in the lobby with Peter Frampton. And we got to be a fly on the wall while everybody was working on that scene. And
Cameron's a
great.
genius.
He is
Him
amazing.
and Quentin Tarantino are my two favorites, man. I
Yeah,
love both of them.
absolutely.
Um, all right. Fade Away Blue. Okay, I want to start with you called Kid the video, especially when I watched the video, I've watched it 3 times. I thought it was phenomenal. Can you talk about that track and what the song and the video and all the ideas you had that help incorporate the whole thing?
Yeah. Yeah. The song was written for my dad. My dad passed away in 2015. And it was maybe a couple years after that before I was kind of ready to write a song for him. The first thing that came to me was the title. I somehow I came up with the title "You Call Me Kid," and he used to call me kid, and all through my life, how you doing, kid? When I was young, he'd give me, whatever, a couple bucks and say, knock yourself out, kid. So I had that title kicking around for quite a while, and I thought this, it's a great title, I think. And it was John Fogerty who stressed the importance of having a strong title. And look at Fogerty's title. I mean, he's
Yeah.
got great, Run Through the Jungle, Born on
Sweet
the Bayou.
Hitchhiker.
Oh man, it's a great title. So I had the title for a while and eventually cracked the code on writing the song. And it's just, it's an example of the old cliche three chords and the truth. It's literally three chords. It's literally, G or actually F sharp, but it's 1 5 4 5 1 over and over. Simplest chords you could ever have. And the truth, three chords and the truth. And so I just kind of told the story. Um, and it was inspired by a picture from my scrapbook, the second verse. I've got this picture of us on the beach, holding my hand and
Yeah.
up I reach. We're running fast away from a wave, but we got smiles on our faces. Interestingly, in my mind's eye, we were holding hands in the picture, holding hands and up I reach. And then later I looked at the picture and we're not holding hands in the picture, but, poetic license.
Huh.
But yeah, so I just kind of wrote it from the heart. It's a fairly straightforward, that third verse is the one that I really, touches my heart because, in my mind, you've got my headphones on, watching you move to my song. You close your eyes and smile and say, yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one, kid. Yeah, it's a good one. And I have so many fond memories. Actually, these very headphones, I would, I'd have a new song for him and I would sit him down and play it for him. He's just a massive music fan. So anyway, I wanted to get that sort of that love and that gratitude in the song.
Did
And
you have a lot of input in the video?
the concept for the video was conceived by the director, John Jeffcoat. He had the idea to crowdsource the photos. So all credit where credit is due there. Yeah, so we put a word out to fans to submit photos of yourself with a significant parental figure, and then we cut the video from that.
I was reading that 16 years ago you discovered your mother's obituary instead of meeting her. How did that moment shape your like emotional journey and ultimately this album?
In a huge way. That experience. So it was around the time I turned 40 that I really started to kind of do a lot of soul searching and kind of looking within and kind of entering. I wouldn't say it was like a midlife crisis, but what Jungian psychologist James Hollis calls the middle passage. So it's kind of coming into 40, and it's like, maybe I look at some of this stuff. And in that process, it's kind of a long story, but through a flurry of coincidences, like some pretty wild coincidences, and then a computer glitch, I ended up having this big epiphany like, oh, I was adopted. Like, I should really look into, how adoption experience might have shaped me. And in that process, I learned about something called ambiguous grief, which is sort of the grief that you experience from sort of, not having had this relationship. I learned about something called adoption trauma, which, people believe that the separation of the baby from the birth mother is a traumatic experience that sort of affects your development in early childhood. Um, and then I was able to kind of put a lot of these pieces together and kind of look back at my life and, you know, look into issues of, substance abuse and depression and anxiety and kind of look at all this stuff through the lens of my experience as an adoptee. And it was helpful to kind of reconcile some of that stuff that was a bit more perplexing to me before. Um, and around that time that all this came up, I decided, okay, I want to connect with my birth mother. I want to reunite. And I was born in Oregon, where they have open adoption records. So I was able to call and apply for it. And they told me, I can't remember, there was like, it's going to be like 3 months or something before it's going to arrive. It takes a long time. But 3 weeks to the day later, it arrived. And on the pre-adoption birth record was the name Barbara Ann Thomas. And I Googled it and found her obituary. And she had died just months before. And so that was just heartbreaking, severely devastating. Like it really like rocked me to the core. It was like I had built up a lot of this anticipation and really was looking forward to that connection. And it was a lot. It was a lot. Again, that ambiguous grief that I experienced.
So
There
that
was
led
a
to you writing the song for Barbara Ann.
That's right, yeah, and I do want to mention that there was a wonderful silver lining in that I was able to connect with the rest of my birth family. So the very night that I discovered that obituary, I was on the phone with my grandmother, who's 98 now, and we talk all the time, and my uncle, who's just 8 years older than me, who kind of feels more like a long lost brother than a long lost uncle, and he
Were
was
they
in total.
excited?
Oh yeah, they were really pleased to hear from me. My grandmother had said that she had pined for me. She had known that her daughter had given me up for adoption, and it wasn't the choice that she wanted. Because they're from Appalachian, Ohio. These are like salt of the earth, people, and she would have preferred to raise the kid. She wouldn't have wanted that to happen. So finding out that I was okay and that I was raised in a good home was really healing for her. And she had just lost her daughter months before, and so
Yeah.
two daughters actually. So my birth mother died that summer, and then my aunt died actually on the exact day that I applied for the birth record. My aunt Cynthia died. So she had just lost two daughters, and then 3 weeks after she lost her second daughter, came this call from me, and it was really healing, I think, for both of us.
That's
And then
incredible.
yeah, then I was on a plane and went and hung out with them, and my grandmother and both of her siblings lived right in the same area, right on the Ohio River, just across from West Virginia. And it was just like a beautiful fairy tale. It was amazing. Sort of, meeting my family, being in a place where my family had been for 5 generations, hearing the stories about my ancestors. We did a driving tour all around the hills where my great grandfather had built, hey, he built that barn and he built that house. And we visited the cemeteries where my ancestors were buried, and it was really incredibly healing. The whole process. It was a long unfolding scenario, and I got into therapy and looked at the adoption trauma, but also other traumas that unfolded later in my life that were sort of intertwined somehow, and discovered a therapy called EMDR,
Yeah, I've heard
which
it.
is
I
like
think I've had it before at one
yeah,
point.
it's
Yeah.
it's incredible, and that
Yeah.
was really transformational for me. So it was, yeah, an incredible chapter of my life that in a sense is still unfolding. And this album is really an outgrowth of all that experience. And during that time, um, let's see, it was 2010 when I met my family. By 2015, my chronic fatigue issues began, and I kind of tried to work through it for a couple of years. And by 2017, I was like, okay, I need to put my career on hold. So a lot of this time, I kind of went into the semi-retirement mode with the fatigue, which was this whole process of having to kind of let go of my workaholic nature and, really wrestle with questions of, who am I if I'm not my work and my career? Being forced to slow down there was a lot to sort of unpack through that. And so it got to a point during the fatigue years where I really, I could kind of go, okay, if there's one thing that I can do, what's it going to be? And it was clearly songwriting. Like that was the most important thing for me to do. And so through that time, I did a lot of writing, and this album is the result of that period of writing. And then the cornerstone songs on the album, so "Song for Barbara Ann," "Lonely Mama," which is another song that addresses that ambiguous grief that I experienced in not meeting my birth mother. There's a song "Gypsy Rose" that kind of tells Barb's story during the time that she had me, and then "You Called Me Kid" is the other side of the adoption coin and the gratitude that I have for my parents who raised me. And then the title track "Fade Away Blue" kind of plays into that whole story as well. And then the rest of the songs, it's sort of like a largely autobiographical record where you sort of drop into different phases of my life. So you kind of come into my crazy psychedelic drug-fueled teenage years and Sundown at Francis Nash. You drop into touring in the '90s with Fading Fast. You get Bare Tree, which sort of speaks to my relationship with Elaine. There's Taking Leave of My Senses, which kind of addresses substance abuse issues. So it's not like a concept record, but it does have this autobiographical thread that sort of runs through the whole record.
Wow. Elaine has been like your closest collaborator, creatively, emotionally. What was it like going through such a raw and personal process together, with her on this record?
It was, I'm kind of speechless because I don't know how, I can't overstate. the importance of my relationship with Elaine of moving through all this. I mean, she was an incredible partner to go through all of it, all the emotional upheaval, and the creative journey. You know, she's a co-writer on 6 out of 10 of the songs on the
Hmm.
album, including "Song for Barbara Ann," um, and executive producer on the album. So, you know, helped kind of shepherd the whole thing through, you know, from, you know, we got this huge batch of songs, and "Song for Barbara Ann" is, you know, I've been saying that that's kind of like the keystone of the album. Like everything else on the album has to work alongside "Song for Barbara Ann." And it was a song that we had written. We recorded the basic track of the guitar and the vocal back in 2013, and that's when we were working on our side project, the Droge and Summers Blend. And originally we had intended for it to be part of the Droge and Summers Blend, but ultimately decided that it would be it's more of a personal song, that it should be on a solo album. And so we kind of narrowed down the songs that could kind of work alongside it. And she helped me kind of chart the path of how we make the record. Um, so I'm still dealing with the fatigue, but at the time it was still pretty, you know, worse than it is now. So you know, it wouldn't have been an option to like rent a studio and go work for 10 hours like we would do in the old days.
Right.
So we decided that I would just record all my parts here first. And then I struck up a partnership with a great co-producer named Paul Bryan, he's another Boston guy, actually. He went to school out there and played in the whole Boston scene.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah,
Nice.
yeah, he's best known for co-producing and playing bass with Amy Mann.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and so
I knew the name somewhere. Now it's coming
yeah,
together. Yeah.
yeah. So we developed a technique where I would do my tracks here, and then I would send the files down to Los Angeles. And there's a plugin that you can put on the Pro Tools session in LA where they can send me a link, and I can hear exactly what they're hearing in the studio almost in real time with
Incredible.
perfect 24-bit high fidelity. So I would just, you know, we had incredible musicians on the album. So Jay Bellerose on drums, Lee Pardini on keyboards. We had Rusty Anderson from McCartney's band come in and play some guitar. Greg
Yeah, I saw
Elise
that.
played some pedal steel. Gabe Witcher played some fiddle, and Nova Divone I had come out here and play some accordion. So just amazing musicians. But I was able to just listen to what they were working on down there, and then we would just talk on the phone. So I would just kind of say, "Hey, do your thing. I'll be listening in. If I have any, you know, comments, I'll shoot you a text and just say, call me." You know, so I would just listen, you know, and be blown away by what they were doing. And maybe I had a little bit, you know, input like, "Hey, you know, right here, there's a push on the guitar. It might be cool to, you know, kind of anticipate that or whatever." And then I would say, you know, call me. And then they would call and we'd talk about the, you know, the notes. And you know, it's the next best thing to being there in person. And it worked out great. And it was conducive to my fatigue issues. And the collaboration with Paul was just a dream. It worked out
Well,
really,
the
really well.
result is fantastic. One
Thank you.
last thing before I let you go. I was looking at your tour dates and I see that you have 2 dates in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
One, the two coolest towns in Massachusetts, by the
Oh,
way,
good.
Cambridge and
Yeah.
Northampton. I don't know if
Yeah.
you've ever been to Western Mass, Northampton, but it's a great little hippie punk town and
Cool.
just out in the middle of nowhere. I love it.
Nice.
Are you excited to get back to the East Coast and play some dates? Because it's been a while, right?
It's been 22 years, I
That's
guess.
a while.
The last time I was out there was touring with the Thorns, which was my side band with Matthew Sweet
I
and Sean
never
Mullins.
even mentioned that. You
Yeah, yeah.
guys are great. I saw you on TV with them too.
Hmm.
That was fantastic. There's a lot I didn't mention, people
Sure.
listening out there, which I'm sorry because I wanted to get to the new record, but
Yeah.
you've had a phenomenal career.
Thank you. Yeah, so the Thorns tour was the last time that was the last actual touring that I did in 2003. I played a few handful of gigs. I went 10 years between 2006 and 2016. I played a couple benefit shows where I played like 2 songs, but I didn't play a proper gig for 10 years. And then I went another 7 years without a proper gig. And then we started doing little spotty gigs around the Northwest, just around Vashon Island where I live in Seattle. And then in June, we did our first road trip. We went down to Southern Cal and Portland, and then we'll head out to the East Coast. But it feels really, really great to be back to playing live. There's a little bit of absence makes the heart grow fonder factor, I think, for me and for my super fans. You know, that you feel this energy, because it's been so long that people are really excited about it. And you can feel that coming from the audiences. Um, and, Elaine and I have, we've been singing together now for over 30 years. And,
Amazing.
a lot of times it comes really naturally and it's easy. And other times we really work on it. And all those years of working on our blend and dialing in our harmonies, it's really paid off. And so a big part of the show, performing as a duo, a big part of the show is the harmonies. And then we've got Elaine playing a little bit of ukulele on a few tunes and shaker a little bit. Um,
So you're doing those dates on the East Coast as a duo?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
I gotta come to those.
yeah,
I'm trying to decide which one. It's gonna be.
yeah, yeah.
They're
Well, we'll
both an
hook you up.
hour
Let us
away.
know.
They're
Yeah, yeah.
both an hour away. So whether I
Okay.
want to go north or west.
Yeah.
Um, Thanks a lot, man, for doing this. I really appreciate it. I've been a fan of your singing and your writing and Elaine and you guys for a long time. So I'm really excited to get to talk to you.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, man. Good luck.
Okay. Take
All
care.
right.